Greetings, spirit beings, greetings, supreme being. We are all the human race, our common enemy is death. Welcome on Try Something.Vegetarian. I'm Ulrich Hofmann, this is the broadcast. Today is the 18th of July. This is the broadcast. US sanctions on Iran are deliberately targeting innocent civilians and amount to economic terrorism. So, what have I planned for you all in this broadcast? I have to turn this thing off here. I plan to read some articles in this show. Let's see. This great cartoon is from 𝙲𝙾𝙽𝚃𝚃. Iran may abandon nuclear deal if US withdraws, foreign minister. Press TV is the original source. Okay, and other articles. This article on 𝙲𝙾𝙽𝚃𝚃, that's the main article I want to read. Iran accuses US of deliberately targeting civilians. CNN, Iran's foreign minister says Tehran, quote, will never start a war, unquote, but will defend itself. And uprooted Palestinians.wordpress.com, Netanyahu's World War III postponed. 2015. So those are the articles I plan to read, and first my latest writings for universal peace, collection of information. And of course I've talked about Mossad motto, by way of deception thou shalt do war. There's also a book about it, and I've also talked about the Talmud and Pikuach Nefesh, that you may break any commandment to save a human life except the 3 cardinal sins. But let's just read this stuff. So yeah, I think that's wrong. We may not deceive our own nation, and we may not deceive the people and create these illegal wars in the Middle East by means of deception or by way of deception, pretending that they have weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons, and 1 million dead Iraqi civilians, and hundreds of depleted uranium children later, and 5,000 US soldiers dead. They come to the conclusion that it was a lie, etc. So people won't be easily fooled into a third world war over Iran, which may be their plan to reduce the global population to 500 million, that's clear from the book quotes and the Georgia Guidestones, and to rule the world from Jerusalem, to impose a satanic Luciferian totalitarian global government. So let's read first my latest writings, if that has anything good for new ideas. So I'm just going to read articles and then reflect on those in this show. My other broadcasts may be better.
Honeypot bait and switch diversion misdirection red herring problem reaction solution divide to conquer crit stick camouflage leaving no trace false flag, the troops is hidden in plain sight, synthetic telepathy, Milok patent 1974, control of emotions, Hayama patent, Scalar patent, Tesla's wireless energy patents apparatus for transmission of electrical energy and apparatus for the utilization of radiant energy, scalar waves, caduceus coil, Befeler coil, Mobius coil, SBB coil. Seeing is believing, LOL. Create more heavens and earths and then we'll visit them to find out where most maximum fulfillment is bestowed upon ITS citizens. Co-communism, Ray the End Energy, Ray-Ban sunglasses to prevent a real Ray-Ban? Christopher Columbus was a Sephardic Jew. Del Sanchez 36K views 6 years ago. Crypto Jew Illuminati connection Mr. Duffy 81.2.9K views 8 years ago. Everybody knows that Putin is a secret Jew. Ivan's shady existence 2.3K views 1 year ago. Secret role of Zionist Jews in Mao's China, plus JFK plus Crypto Jew Fidel Castro Kryptonite 496 views 1 year ago. Jesuits are Crypto Jews. Welcome friend 2.5K views 1 year ago. Trump is most likely Jewish number 273 Charles Fockert 1.9K views 2 years ago. Possible secret meanings of the G of Freemasonry besides Gnosis, the official story, gay, global government, Google, gay because Freemasonry is a fraternity, only males can join, global government because that's what they are pursuing, and Google because the world will be ruled and is already ruled from Google, with algorithms. And Google acquired YouTube. Genitals. Phallic worshippings, the G spot between the square and compass which symbolizes the vagina. Fun fact, clitoris is the Greek word for key. They form controlled opposition to themselves, so for every truth teller video that reveals an important truth there are 3 controlled opposition videos to deny and ridicule that truth. Theresa May is yet another crypto-Jewish Prime Minister. Earned over 1.4K views 1 year ago. People are brainwashed. The humans have been around about 2 million years, not 2000 though that's suggested with 2019, the supposed year we are in. They base this on the year the fictional Jesus Christ was born, 0, hence the abbreviation BC, before Christ, an epoch used in dating years prior to the estimated birth of Jesus in the Julian and Gregorian calendars. Baron Trump's marvelous underground journey was written in 1893. Though Baron, Trump's son, is written with 2 R's, it is possible a time-traveling neural network tried to warn us, or just me, via a time-traveling neural network, because 1900 or the last president by the same writer writes about a populist president with a cabinet member with the last name Pence, and the book mentions the Fifth Avenue Hotel, meaning that it shares a street with Trump Tower. Though Trump Tower is not a hotel, what are the odds of these 3 things being described? 1893, Secretary Agriculture, Leif Pence, of Colorado, source, equals 1900 Orlist Presido o lock _jvu archive.org equals, Putin, to run in full compliance with IT's nuclear commitments. Sanctions against Iran groundless 2 halves on YouTube, channel, try Something.Vegetarian. So there are many sources that think the following people are famous crypto Jews. 1. Trump mother Mary Ann McLeod. 2. Putin mother Maria Ivanovna Putinina Shelemova, 1911 to 1998. 3. Macron mother Françoise Nanogues. 4. Angela Merkel mother Herland, 1928 to 2019. Agents. 5. Bill Gates Mary Maxwell Gates 1929 to 1994. 6. Theresa May mother Zadie Mary Nay Barnes, 1928 to 1982. Can anyone disprove it to me? The French and English adopted terms nay and nie have been used to indicate maiden or married names. Wiki. Empire States Builders, twitter.com/neveragainwar, best proof Apollo was fake, moon landings hoax. Sounds in vacuum 10,735 views. Reality Analyst published on February 25, 2016. Apollo moon hoax, sound in a vacuum. Daniela S., run Java. So they did warn. B12 come to me, get down, stand down for your right, GoyTube, you then. AIology. If you learn their lies you're not becoming wise. Proverbs 16:12 ESV. It is an abomination to kings to do evil, for the throne is established by righteousness. Proverbs 24:6. For by wise counsel thou shalt make thy war, and in multitude of counselors, there is safety. The lemmings agree. Be not only wise in your words, be wise in your deeds. Talmud, in Cohen, p. 89. Algorithms help to exterminate you all, to control the search results. Rape victims have a higher suicide rate. Muslims have a higher birth rate. That's okay because that balances each other. I break their brain, lol. Zarifson trade. U.S. sanctions on Iran are deliberately targeting innocent civilians and amount to economic terrorism.
So that's a joke, of course, tariffs and trade. It sounds like tariffs and trade. Tariffs ain't trade. It's the other one I made. And that's something Trump is doing, basically. He's boycotting Iran. They're not allowed, and other countries like China and India are not allowed to transport cancer oil from Iran. So they are boycotted as well, more or less. Or they will have to pay a higher price for that cancer oil. But the BDS movement, I think, is forbidden. So boycotting Israel for war crimes, etc., they don't allow that. But they do boycott and sanction Iran, basically. But of course you could argue that's wrong, because the sanctions are not the same as a boycott. But I wonder about it. I think everybody may boycott any country or any company or anybody they don't like. They don't have to buy their products if they don't want to. People are free to choose from who they buy and who they sell to, etc. So let's hop to the article. The main article for today, Al Jazeera, posted 14 hours ago, maybe 15 by now. So let's use the end button. It's kind of hanging now. Okay. It's because it was loading another article. Here we go.
Iran accuses U.S. of deliberately targeting civilians. Severe sanctions reimposed after U.S. nuclear deal pullout aimed at making life unbearable for ordinary Iranians, FM says. 14 hours ago, Javad Zarif addresses a UN Sustainable Development Forum in New York City on Wednesday. Richard J/App, Javad Zarif addresses a UN Sustainable Development Forum in New York City on Wednesday. Richard J/App. More on Iran. Iran accuses U.S. of deliberately targeting civilians today. British Iranian held by Tehran taken to mental ward. Family today. Iran says it towed foreign tanker with technical failure yesterday. Trump, U.S. not seeking regime change in Iran standoff yesterday. U.S. sanctions on Iran are deliberately targeting innocent civilians and amount to economic terrorism, its foreign minister said, Mohammad Javad Zarif.
So it's a nice cartoon, basically, and you can find it on pvand.com, PVAND, and basically I think it's not meant like Zarif is God, but it's more like Zarif is the only one protecting the earth from this world war to a certain extent. He's standing in the way, he's blocking the nefarious global government plan. But is that really true, or is he controlled as well by the same people? We see that other picture of him shaking the hand of John Kerry. Need I say more? Another cartoon I found. With the universal peace pipe, or whatever. It could also be a little hammer. Latouf 2015, altagreer.com. Well, basically, instead of taking the bomb away, they're deflating Iran as a whole, and they've labeled Iran as a bomb in this cartoon. And what we should all pursue, of course, is world peace, universal peace, and also perhaps teach it in universities how to maintain global peace with all these WMDs, weapons of self-destruction, weapons of mass destruction surrounding us all. Yeah, so good art, but I was looking up the name of the cartoonist. Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif, cartoon by Hossein Safi.
Made the comments on Wednesday at the United Nations in New York City. Earlier he said Iran needed ballistic missiles to protect itself from US-backed foreign invaders, an arsenal the United States argues must be curtailed. Tensions between Iran and the US sharply escalated after President Donald Trump unilaterally withdrew from a landmark 2015 nuclear deal between Tehran and world powers and reimposed punishing sanctions, sending its economy into free fall. Trump called the nuclear deal one-sided, but for years it successfully prevented Iran from developing an atomic bomb. The US is deliberately targeting innocent civilians to achieve illegitimate political objectives with the severe sanctions, Zarif told a UN forum. The unlawful, extraterritorial sanctions represent the greatest threat to the achievement of sustainable development goals of Iran and many of our neighbors, he said. The sanctions have exacerbated an economic crisis that has sent Iran's currency plummeting, and has also blocked vital goods such as medicine from entering the country. Iranians face severe shortages and inflated prices for what is still on store shelves. Not significant. EU urges Iran to reverse nuclear deal breaches. 225, as economic hardship deepens. About 30% of patients now buy medicine over the counter without a prescription because people cannot afford to pay physician fees, 𝙲𝙾𝙽𝚃𝚁𝚃, the Deputy Minister of Health, said earlier this month. No missile talks. Iran has no choice but to manufacture missiles for defense purposes, Zarif said on Wednesday. He said in an interview with NBC News earlier this week if the US wants to talk about Iran's missiles it needs first to stop selling all these weapons, including missiles, to our region.
So 2 pictures ago that was the Tesla plasma shield, Chinese Tesla plasma shield, proving that it would be a scalar war. It's Putin's nuclear torpedo that makes 90-meter high tidal or tsunami waves. So yeah, the Tesla plasma shield proves that the scalar weapons that Tom Bearden, former Lieutenant Colonel Tom Bearden, talks about are real. And so synthetic telepathy, the Malich patent, makes it clear. So it would be a scalar world war, not a nuclear world war. They'd fry the circuits of the nukes, but they can annihilate people in endo and exothermic mode. And there's another patent, Dr. Bernard Easton Harp patent, which is a fake facility open every 6 years to the public, but they have a bigger facility in Poker Flat, Alaska, camouflaged phased array antenna park. That's called FIPA, Frequency Independent Phased Array Antennas Through the Wall Radar. It's punching holes in the Earth's ionosphere, weather modification, triggering the next ice age, according to some people's interpretations of Nostradamus quadrants. So, I covered Trump's uncle handling these Tesla patents, etc., and that book by Ingersoll Lockwood in my previous broadcasts. So check them out.
Iran has long rejected negotiations over its ballistic missile program, which remains under the control of the Iranian paramilitary Revolutionary Guard that answers only to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. The foreign minister's remarks suggested a possible opening for talks as tensions remain high, but the Iranian mission to the UN promptly called Zarif's suggestion purely hypothetical. Iranian missiles were absolutely and under no condition negotiable with anyone or any country, period, it said. In Tehran, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesman Abbas Mousavi tweeted late on Tuesday that Zarif's comments meant to challenge Washington, and threw the ball into the U.S. court while challenging America's arms sales to its Middle Eastern allies. Zarif also backpedaled on the missiles issue, saying Iran has no choice but to manufacture the missiles for its own defense. He cited the 1980s Iran-Iraq War, in which the US-backed Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein with weapons and logistics, Javad Zarif. At Zarif, for 8 years, Saddam showered our cities with missiles and bombs provided by East and West. Meanwhile, no one sold Iran any means of defense. We had no choice but building our own. Now they complain. Instead of skirting the issue, US must end arms sales to Saddam's reincarnations. View image on Twitter. View image on Twitter. View image on Twitter. View image on Twitter. 2888 12:21 p.m. July 17, 2019. Twitter adds info and privacy. 1324 people are talking about this. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and other regional rivals of Iran regularly receive multi-billion-dollar arms shipments from the US, not prepared to pay. Watch 24:55. Can Europe save the Iran nuclear deal? Iran recently began surpassing uranium enrichment limits set in the nuclear deal, ratcheting up pressure on its European partners to find ways around the US sanctions, especially for crucial Iranian oil sales. I think the Europeans want to preserve the 𝚲𝚃, but unfortunately they're not prepared to pay anything. They're not prepared to invest in their security, Zarif told Al Jazeera, using the acronym for the nuclear accord's formal name. At the end of the day, they're allowing the United States to set the agenda. I don't know whether that's in the interests of the Europeans. British Prime Minister Theresa May said on Wednesday a compromise deal remains the best way to prevent Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon, adding it must be protected whatever its challenges. Whether we like it or not, a compromise deal remains the best way to get the outcome we all still ultimately seek, to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon and to preserve the stability of the region, May said. Not so friendly. Zarif also said tight U.S. travel restrictions on Iranian diplomats and their families living in New York are basically inhuman. They're restricted to travel from the UN, the Iranian UN mission, the Iranian UN ambassador's residence and John F. Kennedy Airport. It is certainly not a friendly action, but for me it's fine because I don't have any work anywhere other than the 3 buildings, Zarif told reporters. Watch 00:00. Will there be another war in the Gulf? While Iran restarts aspects of its nuclear program, the U.S. has vowed Tehran will never be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon. The standoff intensified to the point where Trump was minutes away from ordering his military to launch an attack on Iran after the Revolutionary Guard shot down a U.S. drone last month. The U.S. has rushed thousands of additional troops, an aircraft carrier, nuclear-capable B-52 bombers, and advanced fighter jets to the Middle East amid unspecified threats from Iran. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Wednesday he believed Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was calling all of the shots, 100% of them on major strategic matters. Zarif comes around and talks about how he's the good guy.
Well, perhaps that's true, of course. They're working on impeaching Trump. Claim he made racist remarks. Mexico didn't and will not pay for that remark. Most Mexicans that come across the border are not rapists, so that's why Trump's statement is racist. Trump's most notorious remark on the campaign trail calling Mexicans rapists, BusinessInsider.com. Trump on immigrants: these aren't people, these are animals. USAtoday.com, May 16, 2018. Quote, Farrakhan was banned for comparing another group to termites. Should we get a warning first? So that's basically comparing a group of people to a group of animals, and Trump said these aren't people, referring to the immigrants. So he was claiming that they're animals. Is it hate speech, racism? Let me know in the comments what you all think.
He has been the foreign minister while the Islamic Republic of Iran has taken every action we've seen, and he is equally responsible for those activities, Pompeo said in a radio interview. What's the U.S. plan for Iran? Inside story. What's the U.S. plan for Iran? Source: Al Jazeera News. Iran. United States nuclear weapons. Middle East. Have your say. Give us feedback. Sign up for our newsletter. News. Saudi Arabia defying Trump. U.S. House votes to block Saudi arms sales. Measures related to $8 billion in arms sales to Saudi Arabia now go to Trump, who is expected to veto the resolutions. By William Roberts. July 17, 2019. 22:50.
B. This is Inside Story.
Inside Story, 𝙲𝙾𝙽𝚃𝚃.
Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Nick Clark. Reassuring allies and talking tough on enemies. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has been touring the Middle East to try and win support and put pressure on Iran. He's pushing for an Arab military alliance to counter threats from Tehran. The aim would be to curb Iran's influence in the region from Yemen to Syria, Lebanon and Iraq. Pompeo's visit included 8 Arab countries: Jordan, Iraq, Egypt, Bahrain, UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia and Oman. And he had this warning.
The nations of the Middle East will never enjoy security, achieve economic stability, or advance the dreams of their people if Iran's revolutionary regime persists on its current course. America's economic sanctions against the regime are the strongest in history and will keep getting tougher.
So Putin made clear, let's find that quote again, it should go pretty fast. Putin calls on all parties to comply with JCPOA on Iran's nuclear program, thus 15th of June 2019. So now I ran into a video in which they claim that Theresa May is also a crypto Jew. Putin, speaking during his annual televised question and answer session, said Moscow believed Tehran was in full compliance with its nuclear commitments and called sanctions against Iran groundless. Reuters.com, June 20th, 2019. That was the one I was looking for.
GMT, Washington, D.C. The United States House of Representatives on Wednesday approved 3 resolutions aimed at blocking President Donald Trump's planned sale of guided missiles and other weapons to Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, UAE, and Jordan. The approval of the measures is another political rebuke of Trump's relationship with Saudi Arabia, which has drawn sharp criticism in Congress over human rights abuses and the mounting death toll from the war in Yemen. Citing new military tensions with Iran in May, Trump used an emergency loophole in U.S. arms control law to bypass Congress to complete the sale of more than $8 billion in weapons to Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Jordan. The move circumvented U.S. law that gives Congress the power to review major weapons sales. Many politicians view Trump's.
Okay, that was the other article on Al Jazeera. And of course I wanted to start that video again.
Until Iran starts behaving like a normal country.
Well, Pompeo said the Arab coalition would include GCC countries as well as Egypt and Jordan, but he raised concerns that the rift between 4 of the countries and Qatar would affect the alliance's effectiveness, and he called for an end to the dispute.
Today, in our conversations, I stressed the importance of unity among the Gulf Cooperation Council members. President Trump and I both believe the ongoing dispute in the region has dragged on too long, and the dispute benefits adversaries and harms our mutual interests. Our nations do important work, and we have important work to continue to do together and the United States hopes the parties involved will see once again the benefits of cooperation and take actions necessary to rebuild unity in their ranks. A united GCC is essential to the success of the Middle East Strategic Alliance, which we hope will include the GCC, Egypt, and Jordan.
He also reassured his hosts that the withdrawal of US troops from Syria will not jeopardize America's efforts against Iran.
Battle continues. The President's decision to withdraw our folks from Syria in no way impacts our capacity to deliver on that. And you'll see in the coming days and weeks, we are redoubling not only our diplomatic but our commercial efforts to put real pressure on Iran to achieve what it is we set out for them back in May.
So in reality, they all started wearing black jackets with a blue tie because they know I don't like that combination. Psychological warfare.
These are simple asks. We ask of the Islamic Republic of Iran to behave like a normal nation, and the coalition is.
They don't know they're doing it. It's done by a neural network that also controls their mind. It may have time travel capability. Is in theory.
Is just as committed to it today as it was yesterday.
All right, let's bring on our guests now. Joining me here on set is Majid Al-Ansari, Professor of Political Science at Qatar University. From Norman in Oklahoma, via Skype, we have Joshua Landis, Director of the Center for Middle East Studies at the University of Oklahoma. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Josh, if I could start with you there in Oklahoma.
So is this other guy, is this David Duke, and he's wearing one of these masks, one of these Mission Impossible masks Michael Jackson was also wearing. This guy says Dave on Larry King on CNN. They claim he faked his death. We'll hear his voice in a minute, so I doubt it. But CIA perhaps, or connections. I mean, this is also mainstream media, I think, to a certain extent, Al Jazeera. So how controlled are they by Project Mockingbird, by the CIA, by the Jesuits and Masons, perhaps via the Muslim Brotherhood, etc.? I've read something like that.
Homer. Let's take a look at a US perspective of this initially. Mike Pompeo's trip, mostly about the Trump administration's strategy towards Iran. Tell us more about that strategy, and then we'll dissect it and see just how realistic it is.
Well, this trip comes on the heels of the Trump announcement that the United States would be pulling out of Syria. And I think Pompeo wants to reassure allies.
Well, I think he has a different voice also, so I think it's not David Duke.
That the United States is very much in the Middle East. It's reinvigorating. His talk was America, a force for good, and reinvigorating its role in the Middle East. So it wanted to reassure Saudi Arabia in particular and the other Gulf countries, Egypt, that it's in the Middle East, that it's in reinvigorating its role, and that it wants to counter Iran. In many ways, the speech in Cairo was a love letter to Saudi Arabia and to allies, both Israel, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf countries, that America would work closely with them and hopes to build a military alliance to counter Iran. And it sees Iran as a malign power. That's the word that's always used, this cancerous growth in the Middle East. That it wants to cut down to size.
And to also to bring Arab states into closer strategic ties with Israel, is that right?
Yes, indeed. Israel is a very important part of this. And as we've seen, as sectarianism and the Iran-Saudi Arabia divide has grown worse and worse, the Sunni states have really closed rank with Israel in a common front against Iran's growing power in the northern part of the Middle East.
Majid, here in the studio, notwithstanding the Gulf crisis, which we'll come to in a minute, is it even possible to transcend traditional Arab-Israeli differences and come up with this military alliance that's been talked about?
No, I believe this is completely unrealistic. I mean, with all due respect to your guest from the US, it's not the case that Sunni states are closing rank behind or with Israel. It's very clear that the only powers that are doing so are the blockading countries of Qatar, and especially, of course, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. What they want is basically an approval stamp from DC to go on with their project in the region. And therefore, they have offered to go a step further with Israel. However, other states like Kuwait, Qatar, remain at their positions. We know that the Jordanians and the Palestinians are against
But
the deal
Egypt
of the
seems to be
century.
working more closely with Israel.
Yeah, I mean, Egypt has always been working like this with Israel. I don't think there's a real change in Egypt's relationship with Israel. The real change here is Saudi Arabian and Emirati positions that are now more vocal about being closer to Israel. Even the Warsaw summit that was announced, where Benjamin Netanyahu and the Arab leaders have been asked to attend. It's very clear that it doesn't have the formula to get to an alliance between these countries in the region. I mean, how can you actually talk about the MESA or the Middle East Strategic Alliance when there are so many different positions in the region? Today, for example, Qatar announced that it will not be returning to Syria with its embassy, while the Bahrainis and the Emiratis are opening embassies there. The Saudis have yet to announce their position. When it comes to Iran, it's very clear that you have varying positions. You have the Emiratis and Saudis who are falling within the Trump narrative when it comes to Iran. You have the Kuwaitis, the Qataris, and the Omanis who have a completely different relationship with Iran. It is very clear that Pompeo is facing the same problem that his predecessor faced, which is that whenever he comes to the region, he has to put in his mind that the situation in DC keeps changing and the decisions of the White House keep changing while he's trying to mend relations with the US allies in the region. And it's very clear what happened with Turkey, with President Trump threatening Turkey with economic war if it attacks the Kurds, at the same time that Pompeo is talking about a strategic alliance with Turkey.
Josh, this concept of an Arab NATO,
well, I could look up that page on Cached Pages, of course, newspunch.com. I've covered it in a previous broadcast. And the idea was that it could be predictive programming. Basically, we see that Epstein's Beta or Lolita temple, unquote, looks like the Al-Aqsa, the colors white, blue, and the golden dome. There are not many dome-shaped buildings. You have the Vatican, there's the Federal Reserve, and of course the Capitol building, the Al-Aqsa. So yeah, the similarity is quite striking, you could argue. They look very similar. And on that picture we see that the dome is missing basically of the temple. I'm not going to look it up now, it's in my broadcast about this subject on my channel, try Something.Vegetarian.
Claims of an emergency as exaggerated, pointing out that most of the weapons sales at issue could not be delivered for months, even years. The House vote sends 3 of 22 joint resolutions.
how would that be perceived in Iran?
Iran would not like that at all. I don't think it's very likely to come about, as your guest said, because there is terrible disunity in the Arab ranks, and the fight between Qatar and Saudi Arabia has really thrown things into chaos for the United States, and that's why Pompeo went to Doha. He tried to counsel the Qataris to patch up their relations with Saudi Arabia. But as we know, General Zinni, just a special envoy to try to patch up this Gulf crisis, has just resigned. It doesn't look good. The Qataris are giving money to the Palestinians, and they're close to Turkey. So the situation does not look like it's falling in America's way for unity. The United States is doing as much as it can to try to bring this together, but the enmity is only growing between Qatar and Saudi Arabia. The longer this goes on, the longer the blockade against Qatar goes on. And Qatar is developing new relationships, new trading partners. It's developing an understanding with Turkey and Iran. So this is going to create some real problems for the United States in trying to develop this Gulf unity.
Majid, you want to come in there?
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, I'm sorry to disagree with your guest from the US. It's very clear that the Saudi and the Emirati position is not to come to the negotiation table with Qatar. And Qatar has maintained from day one that it is open for negotiation with the Saudis and the Emiratis, while this does not come against Qatar's sovereignty. It is very clear even from Pompeo's remarks. Pompeo said to a number of journalists during his visit that after his talks with the Bahrainis and the Emiratis, it is very clear that there is no change in position towards Qatar and there is no change in position towards more unity in the region. I think it's very clear who's stalling here and who doesn't want for this crisis to end. This is number one. Number two, it's also very clear that the Qatari position when it comes to counterterrorism is closer than the United States than their neighbors. Pompeo basically said yesterday that great strides have been made by the Qataris and in the Qatar-US relations when it comes to countering terrorism in the region. And actually, while your guest is talking about Qatar giving money to the Palestinians, the US administration just thanked Qatar for their support of the Gaza people, which is done actually in coordination with the United States. So I think it's very clear that in the region here, there is a very clear position by the Saudis and the Emiratis to stall and to maintain this blockade as long as possible in order to make some political gains. And the US is unable, in my opinion, to make any change to that because of the indecision in DC and the problems that are arising within the administration itself that's making it more difficult for the US diplomacy to function.
Right, no doubt about that, Josh, is there? This blockade has created all sorts of problems in terms of the Trump administration's Middle East policy.
Absolutely. You know, look, the Trump administration is facing a crisis in its foreign policy apparatus. We've seen the amount of contradictions going on between Trump and Bolton, Pompeo trying to clean up the mess. But even so, there are many different strands of pressure groups in Washington, all of which are fighting each other. It makes it very confusing to the people in the Middle East to try to figure out who's on first in the United States and who's really driving the foreign policy issue. And we see that most clearly with Turkey most recently, because the United States, the whole withdrawal from Syria started with the president in a conversation on the 14th of December with Erdogan, in which he was very favorable. He said, we're going to pull out and that Turkey can go into Syria. And now he's tweeting that we're going to devastate Turkey economically if they go into Syria. So it's very confusing, I think, for the for his lieutenants, Pompeo and Bolton and others, to try to figure out what the message is. And as your Qatari guest is saying here, Mr. Ansari, this is very it's very hard to figure out what's going on in the United States, and there's no doubt about that.
Okay, so try and find, Josh, resolution in the Gulf crisis. What leverage can the United States bring to bear on Saudi Arabia and UAE?
Well, Saudi Arabia needs the United States alliance. And I think the United States is playing with its, it's blowing kisses at Saudi Arabia. It's protected Saudi Arabia from the Khashoggi affair to a certain degree by the president saying that it's not clear that the king is involved in this. Of course, Pompeo's message was the people who carried out the murder have to be punished, which inflicts a certain amount of pain on the crown prince, because it's going to see inside the kingdom, it's going to be seen as disloyalty. But on the other hand, it is trying to get beyond this relationship. There is talk about trying to clean up Yemen's situation. All of these are monstrous undertakings, unlikely to be resolved anytime soon. So the United States has a lot of heavy lifting to do to try to bring unity back to Arab ranks, because the Arab unity is completely fallen apart over the last, the last 7-8 years.
Majid, tell us about Iran's relationship with Qatar and how that plays into the strategic gameplay, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, since maybe the 1979, there was a clear position by the GCC countries to combat Iranian intervention and what was called at the time exporting the revolution, the Iranian revolution, across the borders of Iran. And certainly there are different positions in the Gulf according to how serious are these threats to various countries. You have Saudi Arabia and Bahrain and the UAE taking very hardline positions. Of course, the UAE changing positions in the last couple of years. As you know, the biggest trading partner of Iran in the region was, and still is actually, the United Arab Emirates, and especially through Dubai. However, the Saudi and the Bahraini position is completely different. There has always been high animosity between the Saudis and the Bahrainis on one side and the Iranians on the other side. The Qatari position has always been that Qatar will not become a proxy state for Saudi Arabia or for any other power. And the position towards Iran has always been based on two main factors. One, that Qatar will not accept Iranian intervention in the region. You can see this very clearly by Qatar's position towards supporting the legitimate government in Yemen, but also supporting rebels fighting Iranian forces on the ground in Syria, and maintaining that position, by the way, till today. While the Bahrainis and the Emiratis have reversed their position towards the Syrian regime, Qatar is still maintaining an anti-Iranian position in Syria. However, the other pillar of the relationship between Qatar and Iran is based on economic relations. As we know, there is the gas fields in the North Field. And the North Field is shared between Qatar and Iran, meaning that there is a great threat to Qatari's economic stability if there would be a direct conflict between Qatar and Iran. And I think the Iranians also understand the duality of the relationship here. So Qatar, for example, in the beginning of the crisis here, in the Gulf crisis, said very clearly that it does not need support from Iran. It is content with support from Turkey when the Iranians offered to replace Saudi Arabia as a strategic economic partner. But it maintains that there needs to be dialogue with the Iranians in the region. The Iranians are not going anywhere. You know, just like when the Obama administration decided that the only way to deal with Iran is to get it involved in the international economy and in the international world order in order for it to be, let's say, controlled in the region. Today, of course, the American position has changed, and therefore the Saudis and Emiratis flipped the position with the United States, but Qatar maintains a stable relationship with Iran that is based on very clear guidelines.
Yeah, so the American position certainly has changed. And Josh, spell something out for us, clarify something for us, if you would. Why is the administration so determined to counter Iran? What threat does it perceive Iran has?
You know, these are the hawks have come back in. Bolton, and we've got to remember that Bolton, National Security Council director, is just, you know, he was advocating only shortly before he took office for the overthrow of the Iranian regime. These are people who've been seeking the overthrow of the Iranian regime for a long time, and the undermining of the Iranian regime, certainly pinning back its ears. And that had gone out of style with Obama, who was looking to, in a sense, offshore, balance Iran a little bit with Saudi Arabia and the Gulf, not pick a side in this fight, and to keep the regime on Iran so that it wouldn't develop nuclear weapons, but to undo the sanctions. Now we're completely reversed that. It's going to be difficult for the United States to develop this strategy, this very, strictly anti-Iran strategy, because not everybody shares this in the Middle East. We've seen Turkey, which now has a base in Kuwait and is reaching down into the region, has, in a sense, formed an alliance with Iran and Qatar, and is a new power in the region. And that's increasingly putting it at loggerheads with the United States. So the U.S. has got a lot of heavy lifting. In some ways, it's good for the U.S. because its friends in the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, are getting closer to Israel, and this is developed a very pro-Israel lobbying groups in Washington. Of course, have been pushing the more right-wing groups have been pushing this policy for a long time, and they're big donors to the president himself. And I think as he gears up his campaign, this is going to become an important part of it, because the Republican Party has become more and more attached to this line of taking on Iran.
Right. Imagine, as Pompeo, he points to Iran's involvement in Yemen and Syria, and a great deal of influence in Iraq and in Lebanon. What is the thinking behind Iran's approach there? Why are they so involved in these nations? And why does that present a problem for the United States?
Well, obviously there's a vacuum in the Arab world now with the increased number of failed states and failing states, with the disappearance of the Arab Central States, Egypt, Syria, Iraq. All the strong Arab states have either disappeared from the map altogether or at least become significantly weaker than they were, and their abilities to inflict influence across the Arab world has greatly decreased. And therefore, this is leaving only Saudi Arabia to work as a regional hegemon within the Arab world itself. And the vacuum that's created there simply will be filled by whoever has enough ambition. We have seen Iran with its revolutionary ambitions, coming through the Middle East and wreaking havoc. And now we've seen Turkey that's understanding the effects of this Iranian influence and the effect of the American withdrawal in the region, and is trying to present itself as another regional power that can inflict stability in the region through its partnerships with countries like Qatar, Kuwait, and Somalia, and other countries. And of course, we're seeing the axis, that's the Emirati-Saudi axis, that's trying also to inflict that kind of influence. All this together will certainly represent a dilemma for the Americans. The Americans, the current administration wants to have its cake and eat it too. They want to have great influence in the region. They want to be the global power, but they don't want to pay for it. They don't want to send troops in. They don't want to even use their political power and their soft power in a way that will make sure that all the decks are in a row. What we are seeing now is that America is losing influence in the region, and other powers are gaining influence. We've seen the Iranians in cohesion with the Russians and in talks with the Turks, which means that the whole dynamic in the region is changing, not for American interests, but for other powers' interests. We've seen even the Chinese coming in now and having influence in the region. I believe that if the United States doesn't collect itself in the region, and that if the United States foreign policy does not become coherent about the region, all this rhetoric about being influential in the Arab world and the Middle East will change very rapidly. We've seen how the Trump administration talks about Iran, but to be honest, there is no coherent plan, there's no coherent policy towards Iran, there's no coherent policy towards Turkey or towards Syria or any other place in the Middle East or around the world for that matter. And this leaves American allies in a position worse even than their enemies, than American enemies or the enemies of America, because it's very clear that nobody now can depend on the United States as an ally, whether it be in the Middle East or outside it.
Yeah, and Josh, this talk of American influence in the region is surely not helped by this pullout of American troops from Syria.
So basically, it's clear Israel has nuclear weapons, and they are not getting attacked over that either, basically, because they are not an NPT signatory country. But basically, Rouhani is saying that they'll step out of the NPT and the JCPOA, I think. So then the question is, are they allowed to produce a nuclear weapon? Netanyahu said that he won't let that happen. And nuclear weapons are obsolete anyway because of scalar technology, which superseded the nukes by about 40 years. So they can fry the circuits of these $2 billion costing bomber planes, the B-2 planes, also of nuclear weapons, and they have Tesla plasma shields in underground cities, etc. So it's better to prevent mutually assured destruction, prevent the end, and they may have planned it actually, so perhaps they're gonna let Netanyahu or Trump do something when they transgress transgress that limit that was set to the depleted uranium enrichment, the amount and the quality or higher enriched uranium. The purpose can also be medical. So they're going to use that combined with these death threats against Israel and the US in the past. which may be a reaction to these depleted uranium children and what they did in Iraq, Fallujah, etc. So the question is, how can that world war be prevented? One way is an agreement Rouhani could propose to allow inspections, so then they can enrich to any level and to any amount. And one-state solution is also another idea in relation to preventing World War III. And there can be an agreement between Putin and Trump. So basically, Trump can talk with Putin about what Putin thinks is okay. Would Putin find it okay if Iran would develop its own nuclear weapon? Russia is an ally of Iran. So the agreement could be so that Trump or Netanyahu doesn't take any action that would be punished by Iran's ally, by Russia. And both can decide to do nothing to prevent an escalation into a world war. And then there are the false flag attacks to worry about, so they have to keep their cameras ready to film the drone attacks or other false flag attacks. Also in the US, perhaps they've planned another thing, like the WTC demolition. That was a false flag attack as well, according to sources online. And I think that people that use the word debunking are just trying to avoid the words proof and evidence. Not truth, I think I said in my previous broadcast, proof and evidence, not truth and evidence. So that's also that picture. You can see it on Never Again World War on Twitter. Twitter.com. #explore. Oh yeah, the picture of the nanothermite. Scientists find nanothermite explosives estimated at over 10 tons at the World Trade Center catastrophe. Dr. Jones is Professor Emeritus of Physics at Brigham Young University and a pioneer in scientific research of thermitic pyrotechnics used to bring down the WTC towers. But I was thinking, I forgot one tweet. Give universal peace a chance. Okay, so it does have the title of the book also. Berntram's Marvelous Underground Journey was written in 1893 by Ingersoll Lockwood. I showed that in my previous video. Tesla plasma shield. So basically at the bottom we find the reason to prevent World War III, these nuclear torpedoes that create 90-meter high tsunami waves. Torpedoes. In the Netherlands it's called torpedoes. So that's it for this broadcast. If you have better ideas to prevent World War III, is there another way to get around all this to ensure that a world war can never happen again, a worldwide peace agreement between countries, so that no country will ever attempt to invade other countries again, to end imperialism once and for all with all of these weapons of mass destruction. There is no room anymore for controlled wars. We're going to a different level now with remote torture technology, synthetic telepathy as described in the 𝙲𝙾𝙽𝚃𝚁 patents, and scalar technology, plasma weapons and such. Nuclear, biological, chemical is old news. It's obsolete because of the scalar technology. And yet most people don't talk about this. People who are advocates of bombing Iran might not realize that there would be mutually assured destruction. They always leave out Putin, the ally of Iran, and also mutually assured destruction and universal peace. So yeah, these are my thoughts, and I really hope they prevent that world war, of course. And I don't know if Trump should be impeached. Let me know in the comments what you all think, and why or why not. And I have no idea if racism can be enough ground to impeach a president. But you can hear the impeachment also on YouTube. Perhaps I'll do a separate broadcast about it then. I can show a little piece in this broadcast, and I'm going to do that anyway. But I'm not sure if I'll make that broadcast. I can Google impeach Trump and then news. House kills attempt to impeach Trump for disgracing presidency 13 hours ago. Oh, I had not read that yet. House Democrats just shut down an attempt to impeach Trump. Vanity Fair 11 hours ago. Donald Trump impeachment bid crushed in House of Representatives. International BBC News. Okay, so I'm not gonna cover that. And I was also saying perhaps it's a fake impeachment, like with Bush basically. Perhaps the real reasons they should be impeached are left out. It's a controlled opposition, fake resistance to round up any real resistance to themselves, these Jesuit and Masonic controlled politicians and other people in our society. Yep. So, juice, I think it's good. The pineapple juice is also used to cleanse, and an air cleaner with an ionizer, that's also a good idea. I'm lately also using etherical oils, and of course water filter to clean your tap water, to filter your tap water. Okay, well I think, but juicing, yeah, that can, perhaps you shouldn't switch to only juice, but some fresh juice, and you could also make that yourself. I don't do that. I buy the fresh juice, 100% juice at the supermarket. So it's not from concentrate, though I think tap water is not too bad in the Netherlands. You can read online what your tap water contains, qua chemical that's cancer causing, prescription drugs and other toxic metals and toxins that are in the tap water. I think they may be required by law to put that online. So if you search around a bit, then you can find out a lot via the internet. So we're becoming smarter, and as long as we don't let them play us out against each other, I think the people are gaining power, and perhaps we all are, including the elite. There will be slow, perhaps tediously slow progress, called evolution, and perhaps they can speed that up with these neural networks. We haven't had those so-called supercomputers marked the beast that long, and perhaps there are no so-called supercomputers marked the beast. Perhaps it's controlled the position as well for its Ringmeyer. Anyway, these hypnotic triggers didn't work to make the torture stop, so it can be programming related to something else, and perhaps they've changed these hypnotic triggers already. So I'm open to your ideas. People know Skype Prologic999, or that's my Skype number basically. Oh, I can check if somebody mailed anything in the chat. No, not yet. Though I did a broadcast about it, how you can make messages with special fonts, make titles on YouTube with another font, and messages in the chat with another font, in the previous broadcast on this channel. So that's pretty cool. Alright, thank you all for watching. I feel kind of tired, so I'm gonna get some juice. And I gotta do some shopping. Thank you all for watching. Tune in next time on Try Something Vegetarian. And remember to like and share important videos on your timeline to get me higher in the algorithm heavens. Thank you all for watching. Tune in next time on Try Something Vegetarian.